all of us are responsible for serving the people of our state and our community. And our state's growing. And I looked at what happened with that last census, and it surprised me. I figured our state was growing because all sorts of people were coming in from California and Nevada and Colorado to move here. And that was part of the story. But 2/3 of the growth of Utah over the last decade was people being born and raised here. We grow in part because people who were born here want to live here. And so part of our job as elected officials is to make this a place where people can live and establish their families and get good jobs. And by the way, when they turn on their tap, can get some water. And so it's essential that we have the water, that we have the rights to, and that we use the water in a way that's appropriate and responsible. We needed more water for Salt Lake County and for Utah County, and this project, the Central Utah Water Project, allows us to get more water. Some of this water is stored in, if you will, in reservoirs that capture unusual rain events, capture that water such that during a dry spell like we're having now, we're able to use that water from our reservoirs. We're not increasing the amount of water coming out of the Colorado. Is that right? We're getting the same amount we had before, but this allows us to bring water in efficiently into the communities in Salt Lake County and Utah County that need it. You guys are my boss, all right? Those who are citizens of Utah, you tell me what I should do. And I was told loud and clear, we need to make sure we get the funding to get this water, get it in a way that doesn't result in a huge loss of water along the way, and either through canals as a result of evaporation or runoff or absorption into the ground. Let's get the water that we have, make sure that these wet events are able to be captured and provide the water to the people that need it in the dry period like we have right now. So I was pleased to be part of the team that negotiated the infrastructure bill. I've told this story. I'll mention it to a couple of you guys. You may not have heard the story about this, but the whole bill took months and months of our negotiation just to determine how much money went into each pot. How much for roads and bridges, $110 billion nationwide, $3 billion for Utah in that regard. How much into transit? How much into rail, how much into water projects, how much into electric projects. And so all that was all worked out by this group of 10. But the nuts and bolts were written by legislative aides and staff members and committee members that had been working in their respective areas for months and months. And some, I think, 2,700 pages they worked on. I have to be honest with you, I didn't read the 2,700 pages. I didn't negotiate those. I negotiated the dollar amounts for each bucket. Well, I found out something on the day we were supposed to vote on this. It was a Sunday afternoon. Everybody came together. The senators all came together to vote. We were going through reading it piece by piece. We had a whole group of our staff sitting in a conference room reading through the bill, and someone said, "Where's the Central Utah Water Project?" And it wasn't in the bill. Here we had the final document we were to vote on, and it wasn't there. And some folks said, "Well, we'll fix that later." And Senator John Tester from up in Montana, he said, "That's not right." He said, "If we don't fix it now, who knows what's going to happen down the road? People that all blame Mitt Romney." He was kind enough to recognize my interest in this. He said, "We got to fix this bill before we vote on it." And a lot of people said, no, we got to vote right now. I said, well, everybody's all come together. They said, we got to redo it. And so this was the one project in the whole legislation that stopped the bill and caused us to go back and redraft and get a new draft and then distribute that and allow a vote to make sure that the Central Utah Water Project, the $50 million associated with this project, would actually be in the final legislation. So anyway, a little side story. Clearly, I'm very, very pleased that the infrastructure projects, hard physical infrastructure projects that are part of this legislation, that are the entire part of this legislation, are going to help Utah maintain the kind of vitality and good quality of life that we've long enjoyed and provide a place where our kids and their kids will be happy to raise their families. With that, any questions you may have, and I'll direct them to the guys that know the answers.
Senator, I just wonder if you could comment on, what do you want to say to your Republican colleagues who would not support this bill? Not one member of the delegation, other than you.
Yeah, well, it takes a little explaining, and as they say in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. But I know some people thought, well, President Biden said he wanted to do something on a bipartisan basis, and so when we did something on a bipartisan basis, why, it looks like a victory for him, and some good Republicans say, I don't want to give him a victory, and I look at it and say, well, I'm willing to give him a victory if it's a victory for the people of Utah, which I believe it is. And that's probably the key thing. Number two, the bill he wanted would have cost a heck of a lot more money and caused higher taxes. And so we said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this bipartisan bill, which is less money. And I know some people think, well, it's too much. It's still too much. It's like, well, recognize that for something to pass requires Republicans and Democrats to work together, finding common ground. We think we have. And, I respect people who came to a different conclusion. I just thought that what was necessary for our state made the most sense to pass, and it is good for our state. Look, we've got overpasses and bridges that need to be repaired. Roads are going to need to be repaired, and because we're so fast growing as a state, as was mentioned, the fastest growing state in the country, we're going to have to plan ahead. Where were the, and I know there are people in the state that know this better than I, but what are we going to do about the west part of our valley? I mean, how are we going to get people from the other side of Utah Lake, for instance, to be able to come into I-15 and to be able to come to work? These are things we're going to have to start planning on today, and these funds will allow us to adapt to the needs of a growing state, which may or may not be as important to some of the other states that aren't growing like we are. Yeah. Well, it's important to me because it's important to you. The reason the Central Utah Water Project became a priority for me was because Kelsey Berg, who's my deputy chief of staff, said this is something we got to get done. And these guys all talked to her and to me and to others and said this is really critical for us to be able to get water for Utah County and for Salt Lake County. And if this doesn't get down now, it could be stretch on for a long time, could result in even greater shortages. And even with the drought going on right now, we need to move this along. And so I knew it was a priority for the people of our state and made sure that made it in the final legislation.
Does the $50 million allow for the completion of the project?
I'm gonna let Gene respond to that. How far along do we get with the project?
No, it does not. What it does is allows us to move another segment forward. So it essentially cuts in half the time that's left to finish the project. So it's very, very significant.
What's the remaining segment?
What that means, by the way, is he's going to be coming back again.
No, we continue to get funding from the federal government for completion of the project. We have a cost share agreement with the federal government. The local district, Central, comes up with 35%, and the feds come up with 65%. And so when we talk about segments, we're talking about reaches from the mouth of Spanish Fort Canyon, essentially to the Santaquin area. And those reaches are built based on cost and based on ability to get the easements. Easements are not easy things to get, and so we build it as we have funds and as we have easements. But we've got the segment that's in place now, and then probably two more segments, a larger segment that will be probably cut in half as we look towards the Santaquin area. Does that answer the question? Okay.
I know, by the way, and it was noted earlier on, and I don't recall which person mentioned it, but there's also $200 million that goes to get running water to the residents in the Navajo Nation. We have about half of our Navajo citizens in Utah that don't have running water. And in exchange for the running water going to their homes, which is about a $200 million project, they have agreed to provide to the state of Utah large portions of their water rights into the Colorado. So we get additional water. They get water running to their homes. It's a win-win for both sides, and that was also part of this legislation. With that, thanks, guys. What a beautiful day. Mayor, you did a nice job. I hope that the next mayor, mayor can do as good a job on getting the weather like this. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. All right.
Thank you.